New research suggests the death rate from COVID-19 is lower than expected. So is it safe to lift stay-at-home orders and lighten up on social distancing? Urologist and best-selling author Dr. David Perlmutter is here to talk about that. And Doctor, it's a pleasure always to welcome you to the 700 Club. What do you think? Is it time to ease up on these restrictions?
Let's first walk back just a little bit in what you just said about the death rate being lower. You are correct. And the reason that this statistic now is changing is because we're learning that there are a lot more what we call asymptomatic carriers or people who had been infected and did not get symptoms than we had anticipated. One study out of Chelsea, Massachusetts, a couple of days ago showed that as many as 1/3 of the population of that city carries antibodies, like you talked about earlier in the segment with respect to plasma treatment. So that means that a lot of people who aren't being normally tested maybe have been exposed to this virus, which means when you do the math that the actual death rate is dramatically lower, might ultimately even approach the death rate of the flu, which is certainly good news because early on, we were told that the death rate, at least from the data we were originally receiving from China, was somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5%, which is very, very high.
Now, we're hearing about unexpected effects, like young people in their 20s and 30s developing blood clots and having strokes or damage to their brain. Why is this happening?
It's an interesting question, and we certainly puzzled over why those numbers didn't start to appear until the coronavirus came to America. Then we began seeing younger individuals getting issues like you just described. And, we say that, why should that happen to America's youth? Because, my goodness, they're young and healthy. And unfortunately, young in America doesn't necessarily mean healthy. We have extremely high rates in America of young people having things like type 2 diabetes and obesity and even elevated blood pressure. And we now recognize that those are powerful risk factors for having a bad outcome when people are infected with COVID-19. So that really does, however, open the door. The bright side here is that it really tells us that our lifestyle choices may be playing a huge role in determining our outcomes. So that is a bit of empowering information.
Talk about some of those lifestyle choices. Well, what do people do that are causing the problem?
Things that you have talked about on the 700 Club
Sure.
for a long, long time. And they include simple things like getting a good night's sleep, engaging in physical exercise, eating a diet like you eat that's lower in sugar, lower in processed foods. Just those three things. And to that, we want to add prayer. Prayer has been shown to have an effect on the immune system, and that is absolutely our best friend as it relates to dealing with this infection.
It's interesting. A lot of people have got heartburn, and they take down those antacids called Pepcids. There's some talk now that the ingredient in Pepcid might have an effect on the virus. You want to tell us about that?
Yes, it's being actually studied, and there is the idea that perhaps changing the acidity within the cell might have a role to play. I am a little concerned that the researchers have not taken into account the effects that drugs like Pepcid have on changing the gut bacteria, the microbiome, and we know that's a very, very important player as it relates to our immune function.
So this gut biome, that's really the key to everything, isn't it? I mean, having a healthy gut is more important than most people realize.
Well, I know you've been fascinated by this for many years, and it's really a bit of, an eye-opener over the past decade or so that the little bugs that live in our gut are playing such an important role in regulating our immunity and in regulating the process of inflammation. And in the context of COVID-19, inflammation turns out to be a big issue. Why? Because what really gets people into trouble when they're now in the hospital is this sudden onset of a high level of inflammation. We call it the cytokine storm that really ultimately leads to multiple organ failure and unfortunately can be the final event for so many people. And I think it's really important for your viewers to understand that while many have been emphasizing the respiratory complications that happen once people are hospitalized, that the entire body is affected. You mentioned earlier about even the brain being affected. We now know that of people who end up in the hospital and ultimately end up in the intensive care unit, that about 3% of these individuals are going to need to go on dialysis, needing a dialysis machine. So sure, there's been a lot of talk about respiratory support and the need for ventilators to keep people's lungs functioning. But now we're seeing a surge in the demand for dialysis machines because this virus affects the kidneys as well.
Well, Doctor, thank you so much for being here. Dr. Perlmutter's book is called Brainwash. You can find it wherever books are sold. And you know, the thing that we've been emphasizing, we had the biggest response on that Build a Better Gut than anything we have ever offered on this program.
It's not that hard to do it either.
Are you into it?
Well, I've followed your lead for a while with taking
for a while, you ought to
and
keep on doing
probiotics. No, I mean I do consistently the berries and the other things that you do. I think it's all very
well. I take these probiotics regularly, and also the prebiotics are things like kimchi or sauerkraut, stuff like that.
Yeah, and I mean, you can do that. You can do it in pill form too, if those are things that you just can't handle eating.
Those little critters inside, just to think about all those little critters in your stomach and they're down there doing good. It's the second brain. It helps you. All those diseases that people talk about can be alleviated if you get your gut going right. Mm-hmm. So please do probiotic, and then the prebiotic is the little critters need to get fed, and so it's a double whammy. But Dr. Perlmutter has been so strong on it, and we have too, and it keeps you. Let us not have inflammation. If inflammation is what's going to accelerate the coronavirus impact in your